We'll go ahead and get started today. Welcome to Corrections Committee. First thing on the agenda, I know I have requests for bill introduction, so we'll go ahead and start. I believe we have Representative Schmoy and Representative Barth here. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee, Representative Schmoy and Representative Barth would like to request Bill 23-RS-0360 into committee. This would create the crime of human smuggling and aggravated human smuggling.
Very good. Committee, questions for the representatives? Any objection to the introduction? Seeing none. Great job. We'll get it taken care of. Thank you. All right. I believe Ms. Carpenter is in the audience, and she has a bill introduction or two for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I am Marley Carpenter. I'm here on behalf of the City of Wichita, specifically WPD. I would like to request two bills. The first is 23-RS-0842. It's regarding fentanyl. It increases the length of sentences and makes other changes to the manufacturing of fentanyl statute.
Very good. Committee, questions? Any objections? Seeing none, we'll make that request.
The second one is 23-RS-0643. It increases the penalties for carrying a firearm during drug distribution.
All right. Committee, questions? Any objection? Very good. We'll get that requested. I believe that it is. Oh, microphone.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, are there any other bill introductions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to our next item in the committee. We are pleased to have Doug Schrader, Executive Director, Kansas Commission of Peace Officers and Standards and Training, to provide an overview of the C-Post. I welcome him. He's also my former police chief of many, many years, and I'll tell stories later about how great he is. Most of them. All right, thank you, Doug. You might be behind on your PowerPoint. I'm not sure if your clicker's working or not. Well, if you'll, John Tay will be able to help you move things along if you need.
That better? Wonderful.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, here
Sorry
we go.
about that.
Try, go on.
All right. Basics about Kansas C-Post. We're a regulatory law enforcement agency. We derive our authority again from 745601 and subsequent statutes. We issue law enforcement certifications. We maintain that central registry that I just talked about. We serve as a resource to prevent the wandering officer. I'll explain a little bit more on that, but you've perhaps heard that term. We also investigate Kansas Law Enforcement Training Act violations, and the Commission takes certification actions when it is appropriate. What we do not do is we do not exercise authority over non-certified law enforcement officers, such as Kansas Department of Corrections. Mostly, we do have 8, I believe, officers that are certified with Kansas Department of Corrections. Most jail deputies, all except for one county in Kansas, sends most of their jail deputies to basic academy even before they get out on the road. But most we do not, and we do not govern reserve officers or volunteers within a police department. We exercise our authority over we do not exercise authority over law enforcement agencies. An individual officer's license or certification is between our agency and them, and not between us and their agency. We do not exercise authority over judicial members, such as complaints regarding prosecution or inefficient counsel, or even perhaps a judge. We have 12 members on the commission. That is set by statute. We have the superintendent of the Highway Patrol. We have the director of the Kansas Bureau of Investigations. We have 3 county sheriffs. They are made up of counties of differing populations. We have 3 police chiefs. Similarly, one is from a Class 1 city, one's from a Class 2, and the other one's from a Class 3 city. We have 1 training officer nominated by the Kansas Peace Officers Association. We have 1 officer nominated by the Fraternal Order of Police. We have 1 attorney nominated by the Kansas County and District Attorneys Association. And then lastly, our 12th member is a member of the public at large. And by statute, that member is a citizen. Our current chairperson is Brandon Johnson. You may recognize his name. He is also a council member in Wichita. We have a small department. Our staff is only 8 people. Myself, legal counsel, 3 investigators, a central registry manager, an office support specialist, and a senior administrative assistant. We are not funded by general fund money. Rather, we are funded through docket fees. $5 from every municipal citation written, not district court, but municipal citation written, goes to fund our operations. We, again, we have the kind of the 2 sides, the investigative side and the central registry side. Kansas officers are mandated to get 40 hours of continuing education every year. They must do so in at least 2 areas. They must be proficient and demonstrate that in firearms, and they must also take a course on bias-based policing. I will note that the 40 hours per year is as much or more than other states in the union. Next, I'll talk a little bit more about the wandering officer. This was a phenomenon, or not phenomenon, this was a problem elsewhere, I think, and this is one way we came up to try and solve it here in Kansas. An officer, a bad actor, would get in trouble somewhere, get fired, move to the next county, 3 counties over, get a job, get in trouble, get fired, move on down the road, right? So here in Kansas, there are certain forms that agency heads are mandated to turn into the post within 30 days of action, one of which is this termination or separation form. On it, it has a place where the police chief, director, or sheriff can write what happened and why they were terminated or separated from employment. That may range from retired after 32 years of wonderful service, or it could mean we discovered patrol car damage, and during an internal interview, the officer lied to us. That's a cue for us to look into this. It's also a form that's readily available to other law enforcement heads that may be interviewing or doing a background on that person. They can find out exactly why they were separated from a previous agency. Now, it is very important to us, just as in the criminal law, that the officer has due process, has a way to refute that form. And so we offer this form to officers that they can fill out, and they can give their side of the story. And likewise, that can also go to the next agency should they apply at another agency. Shift gears a little bit to the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Act violations, and specifically investigations, what that looks like. There are several areas in which officers might violate the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Act. First of all, if they fail to meet the minimum requirements, such as they have a felony or domestic violence conviction, or they fail a fitness for duty examination. Every officer, when they're hired, before they can be hired, they submit to a psychological assessment. And as long as that assessment recommends them for law enforcement work, then they can go ahead and accept that conditional offer. But as we know, law enforcement officers see a lot of trauma. And sometimes that causes them to need to seek help. And we understand that and we support that. Sometimes in certain circumstances, we have to, or the agency administers another fitness for duty examination. If they fail that one, they cannot be a law enforcement officer until they are again recommended to be a law enforcement officer. If they submit false documents, such as a fake report or lying during an internal affairs investigation, that is a violation that the commission can take action on. If they provide false information or even fail to cooperate with the Kansas C-Post investigation, that alone our commission can take action on. Unlike the criminal courts, we can compel officers to come in and make a statement. Should they choose not to, those grounds alone are enough to revoke or suspend their certification. If they fail to complete those 40 hours of annual training, they may also get reprimanded, revoked, or suspended. If they engage in any conduct that is a felony, misdemeanor charge of domestic violence, or 58 different misdemeanors that we've identified through a Kansas administrative regulation, the commission can take action. I'll break here for a second and say that posts around the nation are very, very different. No two posts are the same. Some posts are still intermingled or intertwined with their basic academies, such as Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center here. A lot of posts don't have the authority that Kansas has. That last line that I read to you, I'll repeat, engage in conduct that constitutes a felony, domestic violence, or one of those 58 misdemeanors. Sometimes an officer does something, may get arrested, may have a report written up about them, but the prosecutor chooses not to press charges. And so in some states, they need a conviction to take action. In Kansas, we go off conduct. It doesn't matter if they get convicted or not. If the conduct exists and we can prove that in an administrative hearing, our commission can take action on their certification. Other areas of violation could be the use of racial or other bias-based policing that's prohibited by 224609, or engaging in unprofessional conduct as defined by our regulation 10623. Here's what an investigation looks like, kind of the anatomy. We get our information from a variety of sources. Most of the time it comes in from that terminated or separated officers form. We see, the chief or sheriff is describing something that is a Training Act violation. We also scour the media. It's not rare for us to find that an officer was arrested, and we initiate a case based upon that. We also take complaints by phone call, email, and a form on our website, as well as mail. Once we get that information, we ask ourselves, if this allegation is true, is it a Training Act violation? If no, we don't have the authority to go any further. If it's yes, then we assume that it is true, and we assign an investigator to look at it. The investigator then presents to a smaller subcommittee of the commission, 3 members, who then choose to take action or don't. If they do not take action, the case is done, it's closed. If they do take action, they'll issue a summary order and notify that officer of the action that has been taken. Now, I'll note here that their decision tree is a Y in shape. They either take action or they don't. They don't substantiate, they don't unsubstantiate. They take action or they don't at that point. So if the officer then requests a hearing based upon that summary order, we get 3 other members of our commission to sit in on the hearing that knows nothing about the previous presentation. At that point, the officer has due process. They're allowed an attorney, produce their own witnesses, their own evidence. And if that committee then finds them if they sustain the action of the summary, then it is final. There is a opportunity to appeal that final order to a district court. We haven't seen that very often, but it sometimes happens. So I'm going to throw some statistics at you a little bit here. In Kansas, between 2012 and 2020, an 8-year span, we took about 371 certification actions. During that span, we had about 8,600 police officers. Compare that to the state of Minnesota, they have 3,000 more police officers than we do, and they took a tenth of the actions, certification actions that we did. Further, compare that to the state of Pennsylvania over the time of 4 years, from 2014 to 2018, they have triple the amount of police officers that Kansas has. They took 35 certification actions during the same time that we took 307. I am proud of that. Chiefs and sheriffs from across Kansas are proud of that. Every meeting I go to, I hear the same thing, and I repeat it, that nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop, because we all get painted by that brush. And so it is my office's intent that if we have something going on out there that's a Training Act violation, we get it taken care of. Furthermore, just a couple yearly stats here. We process a lot of forms. Over 1,400 demographic forms were processed during fiscal year 22. We initiated 141, we presented 141 cases to the investigative subcommittee, and they took, lost it here just a second, there it is, 57 actions. So about a third of the cases that were presented, they took actions. Administrative hearings, we only had 4. However, we right now have 7 in the queue waiting to get a date. We would have had more last year, but with the change in the Attorney General's office, we rely upon somebody from the Attorney General's office to come down. We haven't had somebody that that they could assign to us. Wrapping up, our website is very handy if you'd like to see any other information. We believe that law enforcement agencies should be transparent. We want to be transparent as well. You can go to our website. You can look up by name or by year officers' names that have had certification actions taken against them. That's open public record. The only certification actions that we do not list on there is fitness for duty exams, because we don't want that stigma for law enforcement officers. If they need to have help, we want them to go get help. We want them to get better, and we want them to come back even stronger than they were. So you won't find those names on there, but we are very transparent in that way. You can also go to our website. I'd love for you to sign up for my monthly spotlights. I take one issue and get into the weeds on that and explain a little bit more and do some research on a certain area of Kansas law enforcement. So please sign up if you're willing. You can see the required annual firearms qualification standard. You can see the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Act and our regulations in entirety on our website. With that, it was a pretty quick overview of C-Post. I would love to stand for any questions.
I appreciate that, Chief. Thank you. 2 questions from myself. First, did I understand correctly that every appointment on the C-Post is a governor's appointment?
So the director of the KBI and the colonel of the Highway Patrol are written in statute. It's either them or their designee. The other members are all governor appointment, yes.
Okay. The other question that I had, and I don't know if the C-Post actually deals with this or not, but I've heard from a number of law enforcement officers around what's being called giglioed or gigged. Is that anything that you deal with? And maybe you can explain that a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, so it is not something we deal with. However, the lines sometimes blur. Brady and Giglio court cases that we won't get into the weeds on it, but basically, if an officer is found unreliable, they are not to present testimony because they're unreliable, right? So there are cases we look at from a standpoint of, is this a Training Act violation that may, in a court somewhere, end them up on that unreliable list. So if they're lying, we could take action. We don't maintain or keep a record of that because court to court, that's different. You could have an officer go downtown and that prosecutor refuse to use them as a witness. If they could go to the next county over and that prosecutor say, I can rehab whatever you did and we can explain that away. So yes, I'll use you as a witness. It's just the disclosure to the defense of those prior acts.
All right, thank you very much. Committee questions for the C-Post Director. Representative Mon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may have mentioned it, but I think I may have missed it as well. How long is the term of the appointees?
It is either 2 or 4 years. We've actually just been looking at that. We believe the statute was meant to be 2 years at first, so that every 4 years, there's a half the members either replaced or get reappointed. But depending on how you read that, it may be 4 years for everyone. So every 2 years, half of the members are up for reappointment.
So it is a set term, not the new governor comes in and cleans house.
You're correct. Yes, it is a set term.
Additional questions, committee. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I might just have a moment to respond a little bit to my friend from Sedgwick County's question. At least when I was on the commission, it was a 4-year term. And every 2 years, as he says, half the commission goes off. Then there's a carryover term. And when a new governor comes in, by the second year of that new governor's term, he or she appoints half of the commission, with the exception of the Highway Patrol and the KBI. And for example, my term was up on July the 1st. That was 2 years into Governor Brownback's term, and he had me off the commission by the 2nd. So that's how it works. I do actually have some questions.
Sure.
Could you address for us, please, the, as you say, wandering officer, but in the context of national registries for officers who have had actions taken? What happens with yours? Are inquiries made of the National Registry? Is the National Registry 100% registry, or is it a partial registry? And what, if anything, could Kansas do to tighten that up?
I'll try to take those in the order asked, sir. Yes, Kansas does participate in the NDI, the National Decertification Index. We have for at least 10 years. It predated me. That index has been around for approximately 15 years. Not a lot of people know about it. Not all states use it either. Again, posts are very different. Some don't have a lot of authority. Take, for example, the federal government. Federal law enforcement, DEA, FBI, they do not have the authority to decertify for any reason. There could be agents that are behind bars right now that are still certified as law enforcement officers for the federal government. Not all agencies use it. Not all states have a full post. They split up some of those duties, and we are trying to advocate for use. I've been a very vocal leader, I guess, in Kansas for agencies to use or check the National Decertification Index during their background portion of hiring. However, as a catch-all, after they submit that demographic form to us and we know they're hiring them, we also check that National Decertification Index. It's not ideal that we catch it at that point because they're already employed. Thankfully, we haven't caught any at that point.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. But when Kansas takes certification action against a Kansas law enforcement officer, is that information provided to the National Registry?
Yes.
So other states, if they are participating in the registry or agencies in other states, can see that action has been taken in Kansas against a particular officer because we send them all up there.
Correct.
Meanwhile, though, if you're a Kansas law enforcement agency and you're looking at hiring a new officer or a new person, you can certainly query the registry, but there's no guarantee that other states follow what we do, because some other states do not participate in the registry, or some only on a spotty basis. Is that?
That is correct.
And Mr. Chairman, quickly, with your permission, can you talk about the agency's responsibility with respect to law enforcement training in Kansas, the standards, what's taught at the academies, who determines what's taught, and how that differs from local departmental policies about how a department actually runs from day to day?
Yes, yes, sir. So the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center is a sister agency to our agency, to the Post. We both answer to the same 12 commission members. It is in our statute that those 12 commission members must certify or acknowledge, authorize the training curriculum in which they teach. So that training curriculum comes through those 12, that 12-member commission.
Very good.
Yeah, that training curriculum actually ends up with the, what is it, the Director of Police Training, who's an employee of the University of Kansas, and he and his staff administer that part of the program. But when it comes to actually what officers do in the field, what a police department allows, doesn't allow, what holds are going to be used, et cetera, some of the bad things that we sometimes see, is that the agency, the chief, the sheriff, is that their responsibility to set those policies for that agency?
Yeah, it really is. Policies are based on a number of things, one of which, having been a 20-year policy writer for my agency, one of which is your available resources. So it only makes sense that a Kansas City or KC Metro would have a different policy than somewhere small, perhaps western Kansas, without the same resources. So that is up to the individual agency head. There are many places that you can get model policies. I am very happy to see that the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center is now offering a Kansas accreditation program. I think that's going to bring the standards in Kansas up and elevate law enforcement further.
Thank you very much, Director, and I appreciate your patience with me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Certainly. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Director, I almost started with a "isn't it true" question. I'm not going to do that, but when we talk about certifications coming from another state, there's a process of reciprocity, right? And
Correct.
in that process, are we checking the credentials of that officer coming from another state, or is that up to the agency itself?
A little bit of both. We hope that they do their homework and make sure that they are certified in that other state. However, the form that they submit to us tells us exactly where they attended a basic training, how many hours were included in that basic training. If that basic training isn't adequate to match Kansas standards, it's actually the Director of Police Training that makes the decision that he may take him or her, and let's say they only did 5 hours of driving emergency vehicle operations. Well, maybe the standard here is 30. So he may add those hours in. And then the reciprocity program is really learning Kansas laws and statutes. And so that is a 40-hour program on top of anything the Director of Training may issue.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Chief. He'll always be my chief, so y'all call him director or whatever you need to, but he'll always be chief to me. So thank you very much, Chief. We'll go ahead and open the hearing now on House Bill 2114, and we will ask Natalie to give us an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2114 renames the Joint Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice Oversight in honor of Representative J. Russell Russ Jennings. And it also requires the committee to monitor the implementation of juvenile justice reforms. So Section 1 amends KSA 462801. That's the statute that creates the Joint Committee to provide that on and after July 1, 2023, the committee shall be named the J. Russell Russ Jennings Joint Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice Oversight. Current law there in that section requires the committee to monitor the establishment of the Juvenile Justice Authority and review and study the programs, activities, and plans and duties of that authority. The Juvenile Justice Authority no longer exists. That was merged into the Department of Corrections quite a few years ago. And so those provisions are removed and replaced with a duty to monitor the implementation of juvenile justice reform and the work of the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee. The section's also amended to remove the duty to study the progress and results of the transition from multiple departments to the Juvenile Justice Authority, because again, we created it and have gotten rid of it in that time since the section was amended. Sections 2 and 3 amend KSA 65-536 and 74-9109. Or 9101, excuse me, the statutes that create the Juvenile Crisis Intervention Centers and the Kansas Sentencing Commissions, just to update the reference to the new joint committee name. And I can take any questions.
Very good. Committee questions for Natalie. All right, seeing no questions. Thank you very much, Natalie. Committee, we have written proponent testimony from Jennifer Roth, Legislative Committee, State Board of Indigent Defense. But before I go any further, I want to recognize that we have Russ Jennings' son, Joe Jennings, here. Raise your hand, say hi. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here. You know, I had the opportunity to serve with Russ. Many of you in the committee are new, and so you'd never had the opportunity to know Russ Jennings. Russ served in the House from 2013 until 2021, where he passed away in between sessions. Russ was the one of the true authors of SB 367, the juvenile justice reform, that truly transformed the way that juveniles were treated in the state of Kansas. He spent his entire career working on consulting with juvenile justice. He led the juvenile justice oversight, the Juvenile Justice Authority at one period during its creation as well. And so it was very important during our joint committee that we paid tribute to Russ. We paid tribute to his commitment in this building, the 10 years of service of being here, being committed to the state, being committed to our youth, and being committed to the correction systems. And I knew Russ to be truly a man of honor, a very educated individual, somebody that truly had a heart and a passion for this work that we do here, specifically in this committee. As a matter of fact, this committee was created for Russ to lead it. It's quite remarkable. His work and his legacy will be known in this building for decades and decades to come. So committee, while we don't have any other specific proponents, I certainly wanted to provide the opportunity to members of the committee that do know Russ to offer any proponent testimony at this time. So anybody that would like saying something? Representative Carmichael.
Russ Jennings is about as good a guy as I've ever met. You know, whether it was talking about flying airplanes or fixing airplanes or fishing, you know, he was a guy you could talk to. But on days when I got out of line, Russ was somebody that could, in a friendly way, say, come down to the office and chat with me a minute and kind of give me some guidance on some things. He used to always call me Johnny. About the only person who could get away with doing that. My compliments to family and friends. You got a fine dad. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Heiberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And like Representative Carmichael, Russ would call me Boogie sometimes, which not very many people get away with. I got to serve as ranking Democrat under Russ for 5 years. He was always a gentleman, always fair, always kind. He was a great man. You know, I think my father is my hero, but Russ Jennings is pretty close behind him.
Representative, thank you. Anybody else? Representative Smith.
Well, I know Representative Resman and I served 5 years with him. I made the comment that Russ and I didn't always agree on things, but he was the kind of guy that if you disagreed, he smiled. Want to talk about it? A lot of times we had meetings at the rail, just he and I, or he and I in another, and he was the kind of guy that didn't have any trouble laying it out there and accepting what you had to give. And that's what I appreciated about him. Even if he'd frustrate me on some issues, he always had a way of reconciling and making sure that we walked away amicably. He was that kind of guy. It wasn't because he was trying to work something. He just did that. And you can see that when someone is genuine. I have absolute 100% admiration for the man and what he did. I think that the work that he performed, people recognize it because it is outstanding and above what you would expect of an individual in his position. So this is a fantastic thing to do, but it's so little compared to what he did.
Agreed. Thank you. Representative Ressman.
Representative Smith said that, we served for a number of years on this committee, but when I first got here, one of the things I noticed was, and that being brand new, didn't know how the committee system worked, he always had a smile, and he was always lighthearted. And no matter what happened, he just took it in stride, and he just seemed to be a happy person, is what I got out of it.
All right, thank you very much. Like I said, the rest of you probably don't know him too well, so I wouldn't expect to say anything, but I certainly do want to open up if there's anybody in the audience that would like to provide any testimony. Ma'am, if you'd like to, and I would ask you just to say your name as well.
My name is Dr. Glenda Overstreet Vaughn. I can attest to Russ and his position of being able to embrace, even the adverse comments or things that people saw as a difference of opinion. He was not one that shut down and was not accepting of a difference of opinion. I had an opportunity to be able to chair an event here at the Capitol for the Links Incorporated, which is an African-American organization. And we had a legislative day at the Capitol. And I was able to touch base with him. He got back with me immediately. And when he came, he was so engaging with people that they were just overall, really had favorable comments about him. He spent more time than we had shared for him to spend. In fact, even after the program, he was still there for people. So I want to be able to share that I feel the same sentiment that you all have expressed here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to say anything? No? Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Melissa Rooker. I served 3 terms here in the Kansas House, representing House District 25. Russ and I came in as freshmen in the same class and quickly became best friends. He helped shape me into a better lawmaker. He tempered my tendencies to be a little passionate about certain topics and helped navigate, particularly in my final term when we were working on the school finance formula. So it wasn't just here in the Corrections Committee, but it was, he brought his expertise, his knowledge of how state government works, and I think the qualities described here sum it up. He was a statesman who gave heart and soul to the state in everything he did. I do want to note that in my current capacity as executive director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet, I didn't work with Russ in that capacity, but when he was in charge of JJA, he served in an ex officio role with a seat on the Children's Cabinet. So I think this is a lovely honor to the service of a terrific Kansan. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. Anyone else, committee? All right. Seeing no one else, we thank you all for your words. We thank you for attending, and we're going to plan on working this bill on Monday. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2114, and we will move into final action. We have 2 bills up for final action, and we're going to start with House Bill 2071, and we're going to ask Natalie to give us an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2071 extends terminal medical release to inmates in the custody of the Secretary of Corrections with a condition likely to cause death within 120 days. And I can take any questions.
Any questions for Natalie, committee? All right, seeing none. Are there any amendments or discussion as it relates to House Bill 2071? Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should probably start since I ultimately initiated this at the Kansas Sentencing Commission. As you remember in the hearing, we pointed out we have our terminal medical leave statute now requires an inmate to be diagnosed as being likely to die within 30 days. And the administrative process of the application and review takes more than 30 days. So it's basically ineffectual right now. Most states have a policy like this, have a 6-month window. If we could make that 6 months, that'd be great, but I'm comfortable with 120 days. I think it's really important to remember that the process is initiated by the Department of Corrections. There's a strict review process that has to be gone through. Many things have to be considered. It's not eligible for people with off-grid crimes like first-degree murder. There has to be a plan for a care plan. I can't recite the whole 7 factors that have to be considered, but it has to be approved by the Prisoner Review Board. And in the event that something goes wrong or the inmate, in fact, doesn't die within the designated period, he can be returned to DOC custody. So I think this is just a matter of basic compassion. And I think the number of people utilizing it will be relatively small. I think the KDOC may have estimated 10 people a year at the most. And again, all those people would have to go through the pretty strict review process. So I would encourage your support for this.
Additional comments or amendments? All right, seeing none. Representative Heiberger, you want to make a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee recommend HB 2071 favorably for passage.
Very good. Do I have a second? Representative Smith, any further discussion? Smith, Adam Smith. My apologies. I've got to get used to that. Very good. Any additional discussion? All right, seeing none, you may close.
I close and move my motion.
Very good. All in favor of recommending House Bill 2071 favorably say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We'll get that one passed out. Yep, certainly. Representative Carmichael, Representative Heiberger, and Representative Slingensiepen would like to be recorded as affirmative votes. All right, very good. Committee, we'll go ahead and move into final action now on House Bill 2031, and we'll ask Natalie to give us an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2031 enacts the Reduce Armed Violence Act to increase the criminal penalties for certain violations of criminal possession of a weapon by a convicted felon that involve firearms.
Very good. Committee questions for Natalie? All right, seeing no questions. Are there any amendments or discussion? Representative Smith.
I have an amendment. We had some discussion that day about what exactly we're addressing here on.
Can we get that distributed? Okay, go ahead. Sorry. While that's being distributed, feel free to go ahead.
All right, thank you. So we had discussion about whether possession, simple possession of controlled substances should be included on the list. And we don't believe that was the spirit that was intended. And so the amendment simply strikes on line 13, page 11, the possession statute.
Okay. Let's see. Has that been sent out quite yet? Okay, sorry. We're expedient. There we go. Perfect. So as we can see, well, we're getting part of it up there anyway. There we go. Yeah, I can't either. We'll wait just a second for that to hit our email boxes. Now we'll see how fast the state servers are. There it is. All right. just is titled HB 2031, balloon.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen these come across before, you're going to see a lot of changes in the statute, but when we make an amendment, they will put it out to a balloon to the side so you can see what was changed in the actual amendment itself.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation. Committee, are there questions about the amendment? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to show my cards here. I've got a couple of other amendments laying around, but I wonder if it'd be appropriate for me to ask the reviser, does this amendment accomplish what I was seeking to accomplish? Because otherwise I'm going to have to lay the language out and figure it out for myself, and you're my lawyer.
Fair question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Carmichael, you had one amendment that would have just excluded possession of marijuana offenses. So that is certainly covered here because we're striking possession of all drugs, regardless of what type of drug it is. You did have another amendment that excluded all of these offenses if the substance was marijuana. So cultivation, manufacture, that would not be covered by this amendment.
So if I was in the spirit of compromise, I could accomplish at least part of what I wanted through the vice chair's amendment.
That's affirmative. That's the way I understand it.
I like the concept of compromise. I have to look to my ranking member, though, for guidance, but sounds like this is a good start, but I'd appreciate his guidance.
Okay. Representative Heiberger.
Thank you. Yeah, this is one of my concerns both this year and last year. I was considering having the same amendment drafted. I reluctantly believe ultimately supported the bill last year, and I could a little less reluctantly support it this year with this amendment. So I would support the amendment.
All right, very good. My apologies. I need you to move your motion and get a second, Representative. Then we'll keep talking.
I make the motion for the amendment.
Very good. Do I have a second on the amendment? Representative Carmichael. Okay, thank you. That's why Natalie's here, to keep us in line and in order. Are there additional questions as it relates to this amendment, committee? All right, no more questions or discussion. You may close.
I close.
All right, all in favor of the Smith amendment say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no? All right, that passes. We had it recorded. Carmichael, Heiberger, Schlingensieben. Very good. Are there additional amendments or discussion on this bill? All right, well, sounds good then. Do I have a motion as it relates to House Bill 2031? Representative Eric Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass HB 2031 as amended favorably.
Very good. Do I have a second? Representative Thompson's a second. All in favor of passing HB 2031 favorably say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? All right, the ayes have it. Recorded, Carmichael, Heiberger, Schlingensieben. All right, very good, committee. Well, that wraps up our final action and our agenda for the day. I did want to point out, just before we finish up here, my son, Cale Owens, is in the audience. He joined us today. Wave, smile, be embarrassed. That was my goal. Very good. So anyway, thank you guys very much for being here and for your work today. Representative Heiberger.
Yeah, we heard a lot of comments about former Representative Jennings today, but your dad's a pretty good guy, too.
Oh, well, that's all right. Thank you. Yeah, don't tell him. All right, committee, thank you very much. We'll be adjourned for today.